Hey everybody, how are you getting on? First of all, I'd like to say I apologize for the sound in the previous video where I discussed all the controlled opposition. So, Matlockization, one of my subscribers, said, would I record it again? But I've already had sort of 400 odd views. I'm not sure if it's worth it because I usually top out at about 600 views. So probably everyone's watched it that's going to watch it. But if you want to vote below, I will re-record it if you're particularly interested in that one. Thank you for all your feedback on the various peeps involved there. Just to say that it's not only about a controlled opposition, it's also about limited hangout, because I think in every story they have a little limited hangout for people who are edging towards conspiracy and they hope to trap them. And one example of this limited hangout is that the virus is a bioweapon and they want to get you caught up in all this, the level 4 lab in Wuhan and little military exercises that were going on, and could it be Fauci was doing this gain of function research. Now, a lot of that may be valid, but I think a lot of people get stuck there and then stop seeing the bigger picture. And at the end of the day, it still keeps you in the fear mode because it's still saying there is, a serious issue, whether it's maybe not naturally occurring, but it still keeps you in the mode of, well, there has to be lockdowns, there has to be kind of masks, that sort of thing. Isn't that so? And to be honest, I'm beginning to think that the C is actually the people who had it really badly. I think for them it was a secondary infection caused by ADE, and if you want to find out more about that, please watch on my BitChute channel where I explain it. Really important to understand it, particularly with the vaccine, because it explains why just the formation of antibodies is not necessarily a good thing. In fact, it could be the worst thing that can happen. So you can check that out on my channel. But the purpose of this broadcast is to have a little discussion of the Great Reset. You can see there, this is Amazon, and there's the book by Klaus Schaub and Thierry Mallory, and it's $7.99 for paperback. I think the Kindle edition's you get it for free if you're on Kindle Unlimited, but it's about $3 or £3 something. It's not very expensive, it's quite cheap. 378 ratings, and it's got a 3.5 star review rating. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So before I start talking about the Great Reset and why it's important, I'd just like to come back to my broadcast on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. Now, yes, I was quite negative about it because I was looking at all the potential for this kind of Great Reset stuff because of all the technology and the technocracy, because that's very much a theme of Aquarius. But do you realize that I think they've misplayed this whole thing? First of all, was it really a good idea from their point of view to go so hard on the censorship back in sort of 2017, 2018? That's when they chucked deplatformed InfoWars totally. Many people started to get deplatformed, and many people could see it coming. Earlier this year it was David Icke, but what had happened? Everyone had a chance to establish themselves on other platforms. So now when it's so crucial and when they're doubling down on censorship, it's almost too late because people have already organized themselves. So if they'd only done the censorship now, people would have been bereft of opportunity to reach their audience. But as it happens, everyone's sort of coming a mile away. And so we now have VK, there's another platform, Rumble, there's Parler, loads of opportunities. Okay, some of them might be a little bit suspect, but we'll use them while we have them, right? And other people have built their own platforms. So that's where they've dropped a ball. Another thing where they've dropped a ball is this plan was supposed to be finished in 1980. Then it was supposed to be in 2000, the year 2000. Now it's 2020. You notice these were all Jupiter-Saturn conjunction years when it was meant to be finished. They were nowhere near ready to roll this out. That's why they've had to introduce this whole thing about the sea and create the panic, because it wasn't working with the whole climate change agenda. That was really the Trojan horse where they were going to bring this in. Now they're going to do it with the sea and, as mentioned, through the Great Reset. Now, I don't think their plans are going very well at all. That's where I think we've got an opportunity. And what this is going to force us to do is every time they get more draconian, it just forces us to be more creative and to find our own ways independent of them. So maybe we need to be looking at not just our own websites, we need to be starting having our own airlines, our own shopping malls, our own farmers markets. It's going to force us to disconnect from the system, and that's where the positive of Jupiter-Saturn in Aquarius comes, is we might be pushed now. We've all had the push. A lot of us have woken up. This has forced a great awakening because the absurdities of it, the absurdities of the tier level, this whole thing about Started in Ireland, where you can't drink alcohol without a substantial meal. All this nonsense. What is a substantial meal? It's vague. We've got all these different tiers. Nothing makes sense. All it's doing is irritating people and waking people up. And people are flooding to start their own initiatives, which is what we have needed, because while things were going well, when the going was good, we were too reliant on the system. Now we're seeing we need to unplug ourselves from the system before it gets more totalitarian, and that's where the Great Awakening is so powerful, our side. And look, as I say, I think they failed all the time. I mean, they failed to scare people with the climate change. With this virus thing, now they've played it, no one's going to ever believe them, cry wolf, because if there is ever anything more serious, people won't believe it. They've overplayed their hand on this one. It's been a ham-fisted, rather childish attempt, really. And you can't keep people in a level of fear, like everything. I mean, you go and, when you're first in love, it's glorious, it's fantastic, the endorphins are going, nothing could be better. But you don't stay in that heightened state of excitement forever. You come down in the same way you don't stay in a heightened state of fear forever. It wears off, and then, like everything else, from road traffic accidents, you realize life is a risk. Anything you do every day could cause your death, and you've got to just get on and start living your life. You can't live in fear, and that goes for everything we do, really. So, Great Reset, right? Where have we heard this before? It's not new. We had the Bolshevik Revolution, which was a reset. We had Mao's Great Leap Forward, which was also a reset, right? It was a reset of society. It was getting rid of the four olds. So it was getting rid of everything culturally, in terms of religion, in terms of, the way society worked, the old laws. It got rid of everything, including the older members of society, very similar to what we see now. So this whole idea of resetting things, not new, but now it's happening on a global level. Before I go on to talk about the reset, it's worth going and having a look at Boris Johnson's address to the United Nations in 2019. Listen to it. It's quite shocking, because what it reveals is that Boris certainly understands the downside of this technology in terms of the Orwellian nature, in terms of the super surveillance. He mentions, he goes on for about 10 minutes talking about the most dystopian outcome, and then he kind of goes, so we've got to guard against it. We've got to kind of get the positives out of it without going in this negative direction. But he's got no answer really on how to stop the negative direction. And he's really very, what would you call it, lily-livered when it comes to tackling that area. And how's he going to tackle it? Are governments having any success in controlling big tech in any way, in terms of censorship, data gathering, egregious abuses of privacy? Are they having any success now? What when it's 10 times more technical and more pervasive? How are they going to do it now? Then they can't do it now. So do listen to Boris Johnson, because it shows that he knows the way it's going, but he's trying to say that governments will make sure that that all those pitfalls are avoided while we grasp all the fantastic opportunities. And to be honest, from his speech, I didn't hear many fantastic opportunities. I must say, the other day I was messaging a friend, and this predictive text thing, and every time she wrote "and," it went ABS, and she said, but ABS isn't even a word, and that's exactly what was happening on my phone. And then when I write "the," it goes THD. So predictive text can't even get basic words like and "the" right. So how can we trust this AI? So the whole thing about this World Economic Forum, very closely linked to Davos, to the Bilderbergers. The Bilderbergers kind of the secretive side. The Davos is the side which is a little bit more upfront. The press are invited. They all do their speeches. It's all about I'd say the 0.001%, the elite, the richest people in the world, getting together to discuss strategy that will cement their power and will shape the world in a way that suits them. Our governments send representatives there, which I think is an absolute disgrace, because they don't make much of a thing about it. But this is where policy is really being made. So like I said before, when we go and make our cross in the election box, waste of time. When we read manifestos or listen to our local politicians debating, they are talking about issues that are at a very trivial level. They are not mentioning the overarching plan that's being discussed at World Economic Forum level, and it will steer all of society. Now you get these people who say, oh, well, every country couldn't be on the same script. Well, we know a few aren't. Maybe Bolsonaro is pushing back. Putin, is he pushing back at the moment? Is there any evidence of him pushing back? I wonder. Maybe Viktor Orban. We know for sure Donald Trump is the one person who is pushing back. That's why they're absolutely throwing the kitchen sink at getting rid of him. And yet, seems to be coming back strong. Powerful speech the other day, So a lot of important stuff coming out of these hearings. So let's see how it goes. But most leaders on board. But why? Because international trade binds countries together. No country is an island. No country can survive by itself. It's just as me. I mean, I can have strongly held beliefs that I like doing this, I like doing that, but I'm in a society. There's certain things I cannot avoid. I cannot really avoid having a bank account, using the internet to work, going to certain big supermarkets. Maybe I can't avoid using Amazon because I am not an island, and nor is any country in the world. So when they say, why is every country in the world on the same script? Because none of them are on an island. They all rely to an extent on central banks, which are all connected. They all rely on investment, inward investment. The wealth and the capital of the world is in the hands of a very few people, and therefore they can put pressure on the governments. Most of these governments are subject to bribery. And all of these countries belong to the UN, to the World Economic Forum, to the International Monetary Fund, who are increasingly going over the heads of the Constitution and dictating to governments, like, you can't get funding unless you do DAR. So there's so much control now. It's being sucked up into these internationalist bodies that no country really has autonomy. So just as every country has a branch of McDonald's that's exactly the same, the branches of government in each country are really just tentacles of the big system. And if someone does get in that's going to shake things up, like Donald Trump, they're going to do absolutely everything they can to get rid of him, right? Just a message, this robots in sewage to detect COVID. Find out, I suppose, it's various neighborhoods, various suburbs, various neighborhoods, various streets where there's an outbreak, so they can shut it down. I just find it curious they have to put robots in sewage to detect disease, because loads of people are really wanting to go to hospital to have tests to find out what's wrong with them, and they're not interested in that, but they want to do something obscure like looking in sewage. People will tell you what's wrong with them. Sort out autism, sort out cancer. It's going through the roof, both of them, and that everyone knows about, but they don't want to do anything about that. They want to look in sewage for trouble, when there's enough trouble in front of their face that they're doing nothing about. Okay, so let's see where we go. Right here, look, we can read a little bit here. The Great Reset is a guide for anyone who wants to understand how COVID disrupted our social and economic system. No, it didn't. The policies implemented due to COVID were in many cases designed to crash the economy, to crash hospitality, to crash the travel industry, to make travel prohibitively expensive in the future, to disrupt the food supply, to push up inflation, to disrupt, like I say, to crash small business, so everyone's going to be steered into working for these ever bigger corporations. It's been a sucking of wealth upwards into all the big companies who were allowed to carry on their business despite everything. So it's got nothing to do with COVID. And in many cases, these lockdowns are sadistic. They are not just to crash the economy. In many cases, it's sadistic. It's almost like a punishment. It's just to see how much we will take and to just curtail our liberties. Okay, here you go. It tells more about it. Theirs is a worrying yet hopeful analysis. Hopeful for who? COVID has caused a great disruptive reset of our global social, economic, and political systems. No, it hasn't really, actually. It's devastated the economy, but we still have governments, right? We still have a political system. It hasn't really disrupted those. They are obviously further wanting to weaken those, to weaken the power of the individual on a small scale. But the power of human beings lies in being foresighted and having the ingenuity, or at least to a certain extent, to take their destiny into their hands, blah, 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 and plan a future. No, they're taking our destiny out of our hands and taking it fully into their hands. That's what it's really about. Okay, so that was a little bit of an introduction to the Great Reset. Just to mention, Klaus Schwab, as I say, he's born in 1938, and he's a child of Hitler's Germany. Obviously, Nazi Germany was a police state built on fear, brainwashing, control, propaganda, lies, eugenics, and industrialization, which is pretty much like this Great Reset, isn't it? Very, very, very similar. It's almost like he was a child of the Reich, come to continue the Reich. I said that there was a strong leader going to emerge out of Germany that were going to take us in a dark direction. Maybe all along it was Klaus Schwab. Okay, there's going to be a part 2 to this, but let's finish. What the Great Reset really is technocratic fascism and transhumanism. He talks repeatedly of merging humans with machines, in quotes. Curious mixes of digital and analog life. Our bodies will become infested with smart dust. Police may read our brains, as may a court. Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, we've just talked about how they can't even get predictive text right. Would you really trust a machine to read your mind? It could read anything into your mind that it wanted, or put any thought there it wanted, and claim that this was what you were thinking. So, watch now for part 2.